I've got rust in a bottle. Bet you're wondering how that happened. And more importantly, how did I make glass rust? Well, you're about to find out. I'll show you the easy way to rust metal using things you probably already have in your pantry, and also how you can rust anything. In order to rust metal, you're going to need three things. First is hydrogen peroxide, salt, and vinegar. Doesn't have to be white or distilled, just vinegar. Now we're going to mix the three ingredients, and notice I am not measuring anything, but if you need exact measurements, maybe about a tablespoon of hydrogen peroxide, half a teaspoon of salt, and an eighth of a cup of vinegar. Shake it or stir it until the majority of your salt has dissolved. If it doesn't all dissolve, it's fine. I'll be using a paint can and lid to do this demonstration, and you can brush it on, or I prefer to spray it on. You can see that there's a little bit of rust discoloration at the bottom, and that is from the spring inside of my sprayer. It rusted. This is my paint can. I started with a brand new shiny paint can. What you're seeing here is after I had done a couple of passes with this spray solution. You spray the solution on, let it dry. Within about 10 to 20 minutes of it drying, you're going to start to see etching marks as the solution starts to break down the metal. What you will not see is an instant rust patina. The oxidation process happens gradually, but you can see some of the color is on my napkin. This is the end result. And if you're wondering how fast this was it instant? Well, the answer is it's not instant, but maybe several hours versus several years. It's pretty darn quick. I ended up applying the solution about 4 times. The third time I applied it is what you just saw. I did realize that halfway through it that it should be actually sitting out in the sun. The sun really speeds up the process. This can probably spent maybe about a grand total of 3 to 4 hours in the sun. And that doesn't include the first couple of times that I sprayed it where I just left it sitting in my garage. So if you decide to try this, your best bet is to spray it outside, leave it sitting out there, check it after a couple of hours, spray it again, and then see what you got. Let's move on to what you've really been waiting for, which is how to rust non-metal objects. The secret ingredient is iron powder or iron ferrite. You can buy this on Amazon. I'll drop a link in the description. You don't need much of this, just a little bit. So maybe a little more than a quarter of a teaspoon. You're going to be adding your salt, same thing as we did before, just a little bit of that, and vinegar. We are not going to be adding hydrogen peroxide. I'll show you in a second what happens when you have all 4 ingredients together at the same time. But for now, we just want a carrier for the iron powder. You should never handle the iron powder without wearing a mask. You do not want to breathe in the particulates, and yes, they are there even if you can't see it. Once you have the iron powder into your liquid, you're fine though. You shouldn't need a mask at that point. So this is all of the liquids together. This is the salt, the vinegar, and hydrogen peroxide. Now I'm going to add the iron powder to this so you can see what happens when you have all 4 ingredients together at the exact same time. You get an instant rust patina. I mean, literally, it's almost instant. And you can see the nice color is coming out. And our iron powder is not dissolving. It's not supposed to. So it is just going to be powder sediment at the bottom of your cup. The longer this sits, the deeper your color is going to become. And eventually, as your vinegar and hydrogen peroxide starts to evaporate, you'll be left with just this little crusty, chunky stuff like you saw in my glass jar. You can use this solution on wood to change the color of the wood and give it a nice weathered tone. What you're seeing me do here is I'm using some old waste board, and I am actually taking our initial solution, which is just the vinegar, salt, and the iron powder, And you can actually see the iron powder sediment on the wood itself with that liquid carrier. And I do use a sponge brush for this because a sponge brush will trap the iron filings and particulates into the sponge itself and make it easier for me to apply and get a nice control. This side of the board had already been treated with our solution, and you can see I've got a little paint on there where I tried it over paint as well, and it did rust over the paint. You can use a pre-mixed solution of all 4 ingredients to get that look and just paint the stain on. Or you can do it this way, which is my preferred method. I use just the salt, vinegar, iron powder, and then I brush it over whatever I want to put it on, and then spray the hydrogen peroxide solution to activate the rust. So wherever you see the iron powder, that's where you're going to get that rust reaction. And then you can manipulate that, move it around, spray some more, add more of the iron, and you're good to go. You may be wondering if you can just take the iron powder and then just smooth the powder over whatever you want to do, like as a dry powder, and then use the solution to spray over top of that. I do not recommend that because, again, as I said, there are particulates. When you're using any type of powder, you're going to have particulates, and iron is not something that you want to breathe in. So this process will work over pretty much anything, but keep in mind, until you seal it, that rusty stuff will come off on your fingers, your clothes, anything that it comes into contact with, just like real rust, because this is real rust. This is a little label that I made from air dry clay and our crockery stamp. I did use the rust treatment on here. I just sponged in all of the iron powder and then used the hydrogen peroxide solution to make it all nice and rusty. So if you do want to see what I did with the can and the air dry clay, then keep watching. To make the label, we're going to need air dry clay, crockery stamp, and some cornstarch and a rolling pin. And I've got bands on each side of the rolling pin so that I get a nice even height on my clay. The cornstarch keeps it from sticking to my mat and to my rolling pin. If you're using your stamp for the first time, you'll want to go ahead and condition that first with just a little bit of a light sanding block. And then you just make an impression with your rolling pin, just a nice gentle roll, or you can do it with your hands. You don't need the rolling pin. And you should have a nice clean impression left in your clay. I've attached the label with a little bit of Tight Bond Quick and Thick. So just a little bit of glue on the back of the label, and it will adhere nicely. You can use any kind of glue that you want. And then I let this sit up overnight so that the clay can dry. It's important that you let the clay dry because we are going to be using liquid in order to get our rust look, and we're going to be spraying this with that formula of the hydrogen peroxide, salt, and vinegar. If your clay is not fully dry and you're adding more liquid to it, then you run the risk of actually spraying out your design. So I'll be using the mixture of vinegar, salt, and iron powder, and I'm just going to use my sponge brush to brush that onto the label. And just want to get that down into all the little nooks and crannies and make sure that I have a lot of the iron kind of settling down into my label design so that when I do spray it with the hydrogen peroxide solution, it'll have a deeper rust patina in those areas. We need to let this dry for a couple of minutes before spraying it with the hydrogen peroxide solution to activate the rust. Give it a shake. Always want to shake it up. Look at that color change. Isn't that neat? You can do as much or as little as you want. I think this is really cool. And see, this way you don't have to do all those paints and glazes and all of that, trying to figure out how to color match rust. If you have trouble with trying to color match rust, this is the process for you. And now, as a little bonus, we'll go ahead and spray our green label that I showed you earlier. This already has the iron solution on it and has dried. So all we're really doing now is just activating the rust. And it did turn out really neat. I wanted to show how the iron solution turns out over top of painted items. This technique looks great over bare clay, painted clay, and pretty much anything that you want to put it on. And now for the big reveal of our can with the label on it. This is the fully completed project. It's all nice and dry, very rusty, very cool. It's going to look great with a little bit of greenery or flowers in it. Perfect for year-round. I mean, just think of all the cans and things you have sitting around your house that you can now go in there and rust and put neat stuff in for display. Or if you want to sell something like this, you can. A lot of people will definitely pay for aged cans with neat little things in it or on it. Just don't forget to put a good sealer on top of it. So any kind of clear coat, polyacrylic, wouldn't suggest wax for this, but you can try it if you want to. Don't come to me with any disasters though. Let me know if you try it, comment below, and don't forget to give us a thumbs up, like, subscribe, all of those good things if you enjoyed this and you want to see more. Thanks for watching, and go rust something. But just remember, don't pour this down your drain. I really don't want to be the cause of your rusty pipes.